Hey, so today's lesson is going to be talking about statistical questions. And so this is going to be the beginning of our data unit. And so you should have worked a little bit with this in elementary school already, things such as pie charts and bar graphs and things like that. So we're going to dive into a little bit more of that with these next few lessons. So the first one we're going to talk about is statistical questions. And so a statistical question is a question that has many different, or we could use the word variable, answers. And so what that's saying is if you ask a question and you could get many different answers to it, it's statistical. And so variable goes along with that. We know that a variable represents a number we don't know. So if we're asking a question, it's because we don't know something. And a variable represents something we don't know, and that the value of that variable could change, could be different. So it kind of has a similar concept here. So if we're asking a question, though, and we're getting all of these different answers, what we can do with those answers is analyze them, things like that. So statistical questions are going to be used to collect data. So some examples. How many siblings do you have? So if I asked you that question, how many siblings do you have? How many answers could you give me? Just one. Yeah, we're going to do this Dora the Explorer style. So this would not be a statistical question because you can only give me one answer to that question. You have a certain number of siblings. How many boys are in the 6th grade at RMS? So if you ask somebody that question, how many answers could they give you? Just one. So that means it is not statistical. Granted, both of these answers are still kind of data. It's still a number. And this one, data had to be collected to answer that question, but we have to always look at kind of the phrasing of the question and what information we'll get back from it. And if you were to go ask somebody in the front office, how many boys are there in the 6th grade class, there would be one answer that they could give you. What are my classmates' favorite colors? How many answers could we get to this one? Lots. Yeah. So this is a statistical question. If you ask somebody what their favorite color is, you might get green, blue, orange. You might get another blue. And so we could get the same answer repeatedly because people can have the same favorite colors, but it would still be considered statistical because you're going to get different answers from it, especially, too, it says we're asking our classmates. So we're asking more than one person here a kind of opinionated question in a sense or something like that. Which tree is the tallest in the park? So if we're all at the same park and somebody asks which tree is the tallest, there's one answer to that, right? Something you can look at. It's very clear. So this one would not be statistical. However, if we asked what's the typical height of the trees in the park, so this word typical here kind of changes things. There is one answer to that question, but the way we would get that question kind of goes back to what we talked about here, where we would say how many boys are in the 6th grade. But when we ask how many boys are in the 6th grade, we're not really collecting different answers to get that. We're just counting. So that's why that one's still not statistical. Whereas for this one, if we're asking what's the typical height, typical kind of means average, right? So all of the trees in the park are not the same height, obviously. That would be insane. And so if we're asking what's the typical height of trees in the park, that means we have to go and collect that data and say, okay, well, this one's this tall, and this one's this tall, this one's this tall, so on and so forth. And then we would use all of those different answers to come up with the answer to this question. But because of this typical word here, because of the data that we're collecting to answer it, this is going to be a statistical question. So let's kind of talk about two similar questions on that regard. So how many cities had more than 2 inches of rain? So if you ask that question for March, how many cities had more than 2 inches of rain? There'd be one answer to that question. It'd be a list of cities, but that answer wouldn't be different if you ask somebody different. It's a kind of a factual thing. So this one's not going to be statistical. It's almost like a yes or no question. Whereas if we asked how many inches of rain did each city get, that is going to be statistical because not every city got the same number of inches of rain. So for this one, while we would have to go and still collect that data, okay, Tallahassee, did it get 2 inches of rain or not? Yes. Okay, Wakulla, did it get more than 2 inches of rain or not? Yes. Valdosta, Thomasville, if we did all the cities in our area, it's a yes or no question that we would have to ask, and then we would take all the ones that said yes, and that would be our one answer to this question, if that makes sense. So that's why it's not statistical, because everybody could go out and collect that same data, and you'd all end up with the same answer because we're simply asking how many cities. Whereas for this one, we're asking how many inches of rain did each city get. So if Tallahassee got 3 and Wakulla got 4, Thomasville got 3.5, they wouldn't all get the same exact amount of inches of rain. So we're going to have a long list of different variable answers to this question. So that's why this one is statistical. So when we're looking at statistical questions, I want you to kind of think to yourself, obviously the definition of itself, how many answers am I going to get to this question? And then if you're struggling with that, think about what was done to collect the answer to that question. Like I said before with this one, if I'm asking you one question about yourself, it's usually not going to be statistical, right? If I say, what's your shoe size? How tall are you? What's your favorite color? Those aren't going to be statistical because you're going to have that answer. Granted, you might say, oh, my 2 favorite colors are blue and green, but that's still that one answer for you about what your favorite color is. Whereas if we're going to, kind of survey the class or a school or something about, what are your favorite colors, or what are my classmates' shoe sizes? How many apps do my classmates have on their phone? Everybody's going to be giving different answers there. So we're going to have a list of data that we've collected where all of those answers are different. Whereas if you said maybe, who's your classmate's math teacher? 6th grade math teacher. That's going to be one answer. So you're asking a lot of people there, but all of you would have to answer the same thing. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, always please feel free to reach out and make sure you do your practice problems on it.